Alright, now we're talking. The Eagles finally made a couple external signings, although they've certainly led to some very opinionated debates. However, in this video, I'll share with you why Josh Uche is an underrated signing with quite a bit of upside, as well as go over the acquisition of Adoree Jackson. Plus, let's get into the A.J. Dillon signing and his impact in the offense, the new tight end the Birds just signed, and what Philly dog the Eagles added to the staff. So let's talk about that and what Howie Roseman has planned next. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? Well, it took a little bit, but Howie Roseman finally started making moves. And as you're probably well aware by now, the Eagles signed a pass rusher, with Mike Garafolo reporting that Josh Uche will be coming to Philly on a one-year deal worth $1.75 million and just $750,000 of that guaranteed. Now, personally, I think this is a very underrated move, but before we get into all that, we might as well go ahead and clear up how to pronounce the 26-year-old's name.
My name is Joshua Uche.
There you go, Joshua Uche. And look, I know it's not a Trey Hendrickson, it's not a Azeez Ojulari, but there's still a good bit to like about this one.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
That's fair, because I've seen a lot of people that are on board with this one, and also a lot of people that really say it's not going to amount to much. But for anyone not as familiar with Uche's game, he's a former second-round pick by the New England Patriots in the 2020 NFL Draft, where the 6'1", 240-pound Michigan product played his first couple seasons in a rotational role before breaking out with 11.5 sacks in 2022. I mean, the crazy part is that Uche did all that while playing in just 38% of snaps that season. It's just unfortunately, the Nigerian wasn't able to keep that level of play up as he only had 3 sacks the following season. Granted, even though his sack numbers did dip, Uche actually still had a pressure rate of 15.3% in 2023. Of course, naturally, given the uncertainty and inconsistency of his play, New England wasn't ready to pay him big-time money, and Uche elected to bet on himself to try and improve his stock, where he kind of surprisingly signed a one-year deal to stay in New England.
I immediately regret this decision.
Okay, yeah, last year was probably one of Uche's worst. I mean, his pressure rate was barely above 13% before being traded to the Chiefs. And then in Kansas City, the dude only ended up playing 6 games while registering 10 tackles. In fact, Josh played just 87 defensive snaps in the regular season after the trade, with 50 of those coming in the regular season finale against the Broncos. And that's just the start of it, because outside of that, he was inactive 4 times, didn't play entirely at all in the postseason, and then also was an inactive healthy scratch in the Super Bowl.
I know you, don't I?
You know, I'll give you, the more that you start looking into it, the more you see a lot of Bryce Huff similarities. After all, Agent Zero played 0 snaps in the Super Bowl and was also inactive in New Orleans.
I knew you, yeah.
Fine, he has a very similar type of background, high pressure rate, high pass rush win percentage, a big breakout year, which then led to, Howie Roseman gambling and taking a chance on him. Now, thankfully, the Eagles had other studs like Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt step up to handle the vast majority of snaps there. Yet at $1.75 million instead of Huff's 3 years for $51 million, I like this move. Look, I know you could probably say this about anyone, but Uche has flashed at times, or basically everywhere he's been, featuring what many scouts call an incredible bend, violent hands, and high-end speed. And also shout out to Dave Zangaro for this, but Philly's gotten a bit more of an up-close look at Uche. Since for one, in his only career game against the Eagles, Uche got a sack on Jalen Hurts in 2023. But then even more importantly, last season at the joint practices in New England, Vic Fangio got an up-close look at the 26-year-old, where Uche was mentioned multiple times for generating pressure and even getting into a scuffle with one of the Eagles. Having said that, talk is cheap. Obviously, you have to perform when you're out there on the field, and clearly this dude wasn't able to do that, especially with the Chiefs. However, I'm going to remain optimistic on this one because Uche's a guy that was linked to Philly since well before the trade deadline. And shout out to Anthony DeBona for calling it way back then, even if it was better late than never.
Uche is kind of a guy that stands out to me because, he checks the box as an edge rusher that's versatile and has experience, both covering and rushing the passer, which is something that I think the Eagles are going to look for if they do add somebody along the edge, because you got a couple of guys like Bryce Huff, Brandon Graham, that, they do kind of drop in coverage here and there for Vic Fangio, but it's not really their specialty Uche's not the greatest at it, but he does have quite a bit of experience doing it. And he's still just 26 years old. He's on a 1-year deal, so you'd only be getting him for half the season or whatever it might be. But I just think the upside is there. He has a relationship with Brandon Graham because following their game against the Eagles last year, Uche actually gave his jersey to Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham talked about how they talk on the phone and how he was going to send him a jersey as well. So it seems like they kind of have a relationship that exists already as well. So I think that kind of plays into a factor when you're bringing somebody in like the middle of the season. So it's like you kind of don't want to bring somebody that nobody knows. You kind of want to have, especially if they're in that same position room. I think that helps a lot as far as like a mid-season kind of transition period, getting him acclimated. So I think he just checks a lot of boxes for the Eagles, and it seems like The Patriots, on the other hand, are kind of spiraling out of control. Gerard Mayo, they're 1-6. He's calling the team soft. And if he's on a one-year deal and it seems like his role is already kind of declining a little bit, it seems like he could be a player that could be in play for the Eagles.
All right, I know this move has people on both sides of the argument, but still, I think we have to remember and go back to this. A lot of people were skeptical whenever Zack Baun was signed, even with Fangio talking him up. So we still haven't heard from Fangio, but I'm just saying, him being able to look at that, remember, similarities of Zack Baun and not really believing in it initially. So I don't know, maybe trust that Fangio sees something in Uche. By the way, this is also a guy that Bill Belichick spoke highly of back at the trade deadline. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you guys about the sponsor of today's video, Factor Meals. Because as one of the official sponsors of the channel, there's not a better time to get signed up and start eating healthy meals that are shipped right to your door. I mean, I got started for that exact same reason. I just hardly have any time. But with their 2-minute meals, I can eat stress-free with delicious, ready-to-eat meals that save me all the extra time to cover the latest Eagles news. And not only that, but every meal is fresh, never frozen, and dietitian approved, where you can select from a weekly menu of 35 different options, including Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Now, I'll be honest, my biggest hesitations were wondering if these meals would taste good and if the cost would be worth it. But I gotta say, they're much better than I expected, and after doing the math, Factor's less expensive than takeout. Plus, it's not just the meals they offer either. We've started trying out their signature juice pack, and I would highly recommend. Of course, for those wondering, my favorite was the carrot orange ginger option, but they all taste great. So go ahead, get some time back and start saving money while eating healthy. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50PhillySpecial to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. Again, just use code 50PhillySpecial at factor75.com to get 50% off and free shipping on your first box.
Look, Josh Uche is a really good rusher. He hasn't had a chance to rush much this year for the Patriots because they've been behind a lot. And, it's the situation hasn't been good. But he had a big year 2 years ago. Now, he had Judon on the other side of him. So it was two good pass rushers. But he'll have a lot of opportunities to rush in Kansas City. I think that he'll really help him. He's got surprising power for his size. He's got, excellent quickness and a good get off. And he has some flexibility in coverage. So I think it's a good addition for a team that needs another pass rusher, which everybody does. Josh can do that. He'll definitely help him.
So yeah, that didn't exactly pan out, but still, I think we have to remember this. Fangio's talked about it, Belichick, other coaches. Getting a player mid-season doesn't necessarily turn out as well, especially when you compare it to getting a guy for a full offseason to prepare and get ready. Now, I'm not saying Uche's getting starter snaps or anything like that. Yet when you do some research and see that Belichick actually utilized Uche as an off-ball linebacker, edge, and in a hybrid role, it's that versatility that could end up being why Fangio wanted to bring him in. Anyway, I've shared my thoughts here on Uche. Curious to get your guys' takes. Keep it respectable, of course, but let me know in the comments. And I'm also curious to get your takeaways on a couple of the other Eagles signings, like cornerback Adoree Jackson, for instance, with Jordan Schultz first breaking the news that Howie Roseman looked to bring in a veteran corner after Slay signed with the Steelers. And let's be honest, this is a guy Howie's tried to bring in for quite some time. A shout out to Zach Berman, but back in 2021, Jackson actually had a visit planned with Philly. It's just that he was offered a 3-year deal for $39 million and decided to go with New York. Obviously, this is 4 years later, the dude is 29 years old, but a former first-round pick, it's a solid move. Nothing crazy, but it's solid. And Jackson's proven to be strong in the run game while playing physical. Plus, even though he only played 14 games with just 5 starts last season, he was at least respectable in coverage. Again, this is not the same guy as several years ago. But with Christian Parker and being able to be competition for Ringo, I'll absolutely take the move. Reminder here too, but this is about the point where Howie Roseman, every type of move we see is going to be one of those two basically draft-proof the birds before we get to the draft. Which might be the same situation with tight end Harrison Bryant, who got a 1-year deal worth $2 million. And in case you're not up on him, he's a former 4th-round pick by the Cleveland Browns who offered some creativity and versatility at times. Granted, he's got some potential at 6'5", 230, but he didn't really ever have more than 240 yards receiving in a season. But as Anthony DeBona pointed out, Cleveland did use Bryant as a runner in short yardage situations, with 5 of his 6 rushing attempts going for first downs. Although let me just say this, most importantly, this guy is a solid blocker and definitely a cost-effective option who can compete with Grant Calcaterra and others for the backup tight end spot. By the way, yes, I realize the speculation about Dallas Goedert being traded or cut or moving on from him in some form or fashion. I don't feel like Harrison Bryant is that guy to be the starter role. It's just more so, as I said, kind of draft-proof, depth, everything there. Honestly, to me, this is just the perfect timing, especially after seeing that Jack Stoll signed with the New Orleans Saints. Add to the blocking prowess and keep this running game going in the right direction. Speaking of the running game, though, imagine what you could do with a tush push with Bryant, Saquon, and even A.J. Dillon now in the mix. Okay, no, Jalen Hurts isn't giving up his tush push duties, but the fact that Bryant has some trickery in his bag does make it fun. Anyway, getting back to A.J. Dillon, the Eagles clearly have one of the most leg-dominant running back rooms in the NFL now. Heck, you got Saquon and Quadzilla behind this offensive line. However, I mentioned this on the live stream, but personally, this isn't a signing with a whole lot of guarantees. I mean, sure, Dillon has some crazy ability for a dude who's 6 foot, 247 pounds. Yet at the same time, we're talking about a guy who averaged just 3.4 yards per carry in 2023 and then missed all of 2024 with a neck injury, which naturally starts to have people bring up the comparisons to Rashad Penny. And yeah, it could totally turn into that where Dillon is inactive or may not even make the roster. Although let me just say this, one of the bigger differences with AJ is the fact that he's a much better pass catcher and has the proven ability to be a good pass blocker. Seriously, the Packers would often go empty and then basically use Dillon in a tight end position to protect the quarterback. Overall though, my prediction is that Will Shipley still ends up being your RB2 and then AJ Dillon is just that reserve piece. Or if Shipley struggles in pass protection, then it's never a bad thing to have a guy who can come in and spell Saquon occasionally. I mean, either way, the running game is going to be dominant and this offense is going to be dominant. Yes, I realize it's a new offensive coordinator in Kevin Patullo, but still, if we think about it, it's the same similar core. I mean, you got the core group of guys, so I don't anticipate a whole lot of changes. If anything, they're going to be as good, if not maybe a little bit better. And then when it comes to the defense, they can still very easily be a top unit. But even if they're only top 5 or top 10, then I don't think there's a doubt we could very easily be looking at another chance to run it back. Granted, that running depends a lot on the play of the right guard position. And still another day without any update on Mekhi Becton. Of course, Tyler Steen is always an option, and he was serviceable in some reserve snaps last season. Or if you're thinking the Kenyon Green route since Howie Roseman traded for him, Jeff Stoutland made an impression, and Green is hoping to show up in a big way.
Great conversation, a great man. I know that he loves his players, he loves the coach, and I'm gonna give him everything I have. You know, I'm just here, you know, to be my best.
How would you sort of describe your game?
I'm a physical guy. You know, I like just, you know, trying to be a mauler. You know, just moving people, and you know, wherever that goes with, you know, I'm playing this season or wherever I need to play. I'm gonna do whatever I need to do, you know, to make sure that, you know, the Eagles we're winning games.
Look, I've said this a couple times now, I don't know if Green's going to have that big of a role this season. However, one guy who will have a bigger role, at least more than last season, has been VanSumeren, thanks to the Eagles not only signing him back, but also officially signing him as strictly a fullback. Meaning for one, he will be changing his number, and two, he won't have to report every single play like he had to last season. Now sure, the usage of the fullback was few and far between, but let's also not forget how effective Saquon was with BVS blocking in front of him. Although ultimately, like I said, the Birds didn't use the fullback too much, especially because it seemed to be more of a mid-season revelation. Yet with a full offseason to prepare and add things to the playbook, it wouldn't surprise me if you see a lot more of a ground and pound rushing attack, plus again, you're making a move to sign a guy officially as a fullback. I think that tells you a little bit more of an emphasis there. Anyway, while there's still some unknowns in Kevin Patullo's offense, the Eagles are expected to hire Georgia assistant quarterbacks coach Montgomery Van Gorder to an offensive assistant position. Plus, the other connection here is that Van Gorder's father, Brian, was current Eagles quarterback coach Scott Loeffler's defensive coordinator at Bowling Green in 2020. Oh, also on the topic of the quarterback room, in case you didn't get the chance to hear from new addition Dorian Thompson-Robinson, he shared about his experience with Philly and the unique connection to Jalen Hurts.
I took a top 30 visit here and loved it. And so to be back here is definitely a good feeling for sure.
Anybody you may have worked out with in the pre-draft or just the Eagles in general even?
Yeah, I'll jump right into the quarterback room. I've crossed paths with Jalen a few times. He's worked with a chess mentor of mine and Seth Mikowski, so we have a little bit of familiarity there. I'll have to ask him a bit about chess when I get into the room, and if he wants to play a couple games or two.
Like, I'd pay decent money to see those two square off. Now, the other thing we will see about is whether Philly decides to bring back Britain Covey, because they didn't end up tendering the 27-year-old, meaning he's now free to sign with other teams. And even though he was injured and used sparingly last season, you'd have to wonder if teams see his punt return ability and try to make a play at him. Honestly, for me, I'd look at trying to bring him back so that he can be the full-time punt returner, and that way we can get Cooper DeJean strictly focused on the slot position. I will say, at least we've started to get some moves from the Eagles, but I can almost guarantee you that Howie Roseman's not done, so do me a favor, hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, turn the notifications on so you don't miss anything. This has been the Philly Special.